want to raise an issue with the Minister. It's relevant to quite a number of sections in the bill, but it is referenced in section 45, this definition of an active farmer. Now, this covers a number of issues throughout the bill. It covers the issue of the long-term leases, the retirement relief, the capital acquisitions tax relief for young farmers, and the single farm payment disposal, which is referred to in section 45 here. And the difficulty is in relation to this definition of an active farmer. And in my part of the country, in counties like Roscommon, Leitrim, Galway, the majority of farmers are part-time farmers. And the definition of an active farmer under the legislation as it stands at the moment is that they must spend at least 50% of their time actively farming. Now, because of the farm sizes that we have, and also the capacity of those particular farms, particularly on marginal land, to actually make a sustainable income, it requires farmers to work off farm to actually supplement that income. And you'll see right across the Teagasc income studies that are done on an annual basis how important off-farm income is. And particularly in my own constituency, where a lot of farmers work with Bord na Móna as seasonal workers, a lot of them would fail this particular test, even though they're full-time farmers. Other than the seasonal work that they do with Bord na Móna, they would fail to come under it. And the majority of farmers, about 6 out of 10 farmers in the west of Ireland, are part-time farmers. Now, the objective behind all of this is farm consolidation, is about transferring farm holdings to younger farmers that are more energetic, that can increase production. And we need that more than anywhere in the country in the west of Ireland, where we have very fragmented holdings, where we have a very old farmer population, where we're getting it difficult to get young farmers to take over holdings. And there is huge potential for massive efficiencies in relation to agricultural production. But the active farmer definition, as it stands at the moment, would actually limit the possibility of that. Now, I know, Minister, you have given indications that you will look at this, but there aren't amendments before us here, and you might clarify exactly what the position is and what your intention is. Is it just to cover the issue of long-term leases, or to cover the other categories that I've raised in relation to the definition of active farmer? Thank you.
And I must say, deputies on all sides of the House contacted me on this, both formally and informally. So the original definition of the active farmer was somebody who spent at least half his time farming, 50% of his time. And the presumption was that we were talking about a 40-hour week, so 20 hours. Now, it's reasonable to assume that somebody could spend 20 hours farming by, having an hour after work in the evening or two, and then picking up another 10 hours at the weekends, because farming is a kind of activity where, unfortunately for young farmers, a bit of Sunday work is always required. And especially with dairying, you're very familiar with the way it works. So it was also a trust system. There was no one either from the Revenue Commissioners or Teagasc going to be chasing around with a watch to see that somebody spent 20 hours on the farm. So it being a trust system, and it being an assumption of a 40-hour week and a 20 on the farm, it looked reasonable. But the farming organisations and individual deputies and individual farmers are looking for additional assurance. So in addition to the 50 hours dedicated to farm work, we have another couple of measures now, and there are 3 other ones. Some of them we had in already, but I might as well go through them. So the first test would be 50 hours on the farm. A separate test is if one is a qualified farmer, and a qualified farmer is a farmer who has been certified after pursuing one of those courses you'd be quite familiar with, then there is no hours test. It's sufficient to be a qualified farmer and have the ability to farm the land commercially. And then you qualify for the benefits in the bill, and these include stamp duty, capital acquisitions tax, and so on. All the 3, I think, that you referred to. So they all run on the same definitions. The third definition then was that supposing you were working off the land, or the young farmer was in Dublin, but he was qualified or he wasn't qualified. If he was to lease his land to a qualified farmer, whether he qualified under the 50% rule or he qualified under the qualified farmer rule, the benefits would again apply there, even as long as the leaseor qualified under the active definition. And then the third definition was, and it meets, I think, Deputy Doherty's and Deputy McGrath's concerns as stated, that if somebody who was off the land for a number of years and hadn't done any qualification leading to certification, if they inherited, for example, on a sudden death, and you know the kind of things that can happen, and if you can imagine it usually happens in rural Ireland, and somebody is left high and dry, inherited, but not being able to avail of it. We have introduced a measure where somebody can qualify in the 3 subsequent years. So there's a 3-year window where one can qualify. But again, like the purpose of this is not to raise taxes. The purpose of the measures are not to have additional revenue. The purpose of the measures is to put incentives in place so that land wouldn't lie fallow, and that farmland would be used to best purpose and farm commercially. And it's an honour system. There's no going to be chasing around after somebody. But it does incentivize people to put land in the hands of people who will farm it commercially or who are qualified to do so. And that's the purpose of it. And when we get to Amendment 83, we can go through it again. But I assume, Deputy, you're in a bit of a hurry this evening with all the other things you have to do. So that's the position. If that's satisfactory.
Yes, it does very much satisfy, and thank you, Minister. I think there's quite a bit of flexibility in relation to that, and I welcome those changes. Can I ask just one question, and that is, what do you see is the potential exchequer cost in relation to this, and potentially the number of people that would avail of it? I know this is a guesstimate more than anything, but I know that you still, for the purpose of the calculation, have to put a figure in place. So.
Our original estimate was 7 million, but that's a shot in the dark. We think now that with the response we're getting, it'll probably be somewhat less than that. Maybe a good bit less, but we'll provide for it. It's not, in the overall scheme of things, that's not a huge consideration. Our consideration is to get as much land as possible in the country back to a position where it's farmed commercially, and if possible farmed by the next generation of farmers, whether they're young men or young women, or both.
Thanks, Minister.